Do you ever think about those African-American appetizers? No one makes anymore and feel a tug you can't explain? These appetizers once opened every gathering, bringing people together before anything else began. What did we lose without noticing when these small bites disappeared? Pickled pig feet bites were once a familiar sight at gatherings where everyone brought something from home, something that told a story about where they came from and what they valued. Families chilled the jars overnight until the meat firmed enough to slice into tangy, shiny pieces rich with gelatin. Served on toothpicks, they had a bright vinegar snap that made you reach for another even if you insisted you would not. They were cheap, filling, and deeply tied to Southern Black foodways where nothing was wasted. Today, they almost never appear, but anyone who remembers them can still taste the history and thrift behind every bite. Salmon croquette balls were the kind of appetizer families relied on when they needed something hearty and affordable. Canned salmon was already a weeknight staple, but rolling it into tiny balls and frying them until crisp turned ordinary ingredients into something festive. They came out golden on the outside and tender inside, seasoned simply but perfectly. Grandmothers filled trays with them, and they vanished fast because they were easy to grab and full of flavor. Over the years, they faded from party menus, but for those who remember them, the taste still feels warm, comforting, and filled with love. Fried chicken gizzards were the appetizer that proved who knew their way around a skillet. Gizzards had to be cleaned right, seasoned well, and fried long enough to get tender. They were salty, chewy, crispy, and full of flavor that clung to your fingers. People ate them at church events, backyard gatherings, and fish fries where elders talked and kids played. They were cheap but felt like a treat made with care. Over time, they disappeared as fewer people cooked organ meats, but the memory of a cast iron skillet popping with hot oil still brings many right back home. Hot water cornbread fritters were small rounds of golden comfort made from cornmeal, salt, boiling water, and a cook's instinct. They hit the skillet with a soft sizzle, crisping on the outside while staying warm and tender inside. People served them with honey butter, molasses, or nothing at all because the flavor stood strong on its own. They showed up at church gatherings and holiday tables, disappearing faster than anyone expected. Over time, they faded as boxed mixes replaced homemade doughs. But one bite can still bring back porch mornings, warm kitchens, and elders humming as they cooked. Chitlin fritters were one of those dishes that told you a cook had patience, pride, and deep roots in the Southern Black culinary tradition. Chitlins took time to clean, time to season, and time to prepare, and turning them into fritters was a way of transforming a humble ingredient into something celebratory. Families would chop the cleaned chitlins finely, mix them with spices, flour, onion, and sometimes peppers, then fry spoonfuls of the batter until crisp and golden. The result was a bite-sized appetizer that was savory, rich, and full of the kind of flavor that made elders nod with approval. These fritters appeared at holiday gatherings, family reunions, and cookouts where everyone knew who made them best. People ate them with hot sauce or mustard, savoring each bite slowly. They faded over time as chitlins became less commonly prepared and as younger generations shied away from traditional dishes that required long preparation. But for those who remember them, chitlin fritters taste like heritage, like work done with love, like family coming together. They were not made often, but when they were, they marked the day as something special. Crab salad on saltines was a church basement classic that showed how far a single can or handful of fresh crab could go when seasoned with care. The mixture was creamy, tangy, slightly sweet, and seasoned with relish, pepper, and sometimes a touch of paprika. Families spooned it onto saltines just before serving so the crackers stayed crisp. These little bites disappeared quickly from platters because they were easy to grab, easy to eat, and packed with flavor that tasted like something far more expensive. They were the pride of church potlucks, fish fries, and community gatherings where everyone dressed their tables with their best recipes. The crab salad was not fancy, but the love and seasoning made it feel that way. Over time, as processed dips and store-bought trays replaced homemade appetizers, crab salad on saltines drifted away. But those who remember it can still taste the cool, creamy mixture meeting the crunch of the cracker. It was the kind of simple offering that felt generous, wholesome, and quietly joyful. Ham salad finger sandwiches were the small but mighty stars of every gathering where someone needed to feed a crowd without spending much. Families ground leftover ham from holidays, mixed it with relish, mayonnaise, mustard, and seasonings, then spread it on soft white bread before cutting each sandwich into tidy rectangles. They were simple, soft, salty, and satisfying. These finger sandwiches stacked easily on trays and always disappeared long before the main dishes arrived. They tasted like tradition, like resourcefulness, like someone knew how to stretch leftovers into something wonderful. Kids loved them because they were small and easy to eat. Adults loved them because they reminded them of earlier times when nothing went to waste. As party foods became more polished and modern, ham salad finger sandwiches faded from view. But a single bite would bring back memories of card tables, church socials, and family gatherings held in living rooms that smelled like good cooking and generosity. Pickle and cheese toothpick stacks were the humble heroes of potluck tables because they were cheap, quick, and strangely addictive. A slice of cheese, a slice of pickle, sometimes a tiny piece of lunch meat, all held together with a wooden toothpick. These little stacks showed up everywhere from card nights to school fairs because they took almost no time to prepare but always tasted better than expected. The sharpness of the pickle cut through the richness of the cheese, creating a flavor that was simple but surprisingly satisfying. Families made dozens in minutes, arranging them on mismatched plates where they never lasted long. They were not fancy, but they were part of a shared memory of community gatherings where everyone brought what they could. Over time, people stopped making them, choosing more modern snacks, but those simple stacks still hold a nostalgic charm. They were proof that even the most ordinary ingredients could bring joy. Souse meat squares were one of the boldest appetizers of mid-century African-American gatherings, made from pork head cheese set in a tangy gelatin seasoned with vinegar and spices. Families sliced it into neat cubes and served it cold. The flavor was sharp, savory, and unforgettable, loved by elders who grew up eating every part of the animal. These squares appeared at card parties, fish fries, and social gatherings where people knew how to appreciate strong flavors. Younger generations sometimes avoided them, but those who loved them swore there was nothing else like it. The texture was firm but tender, the taste bold but satisfying. Over time, as fewer people made homemade souse, the dish nearly vanished. But for those who remember it, souse meat squares taste like history, resilience, and the resourceful cooking that carried families through lean times. Stuffed celery with pimento cheese was the bright, crunchy appetizer that lit up party tables with its color alone. Families mixed homemade pimento cheese with just the right balance of sharpness and creaminess, then pressed it into chilled celery sticks that snapped clean with each bite. These appetizers were refreshing, rich, and easy to hold while mingling. They showed up at card parties, club meetings, family gatherings, and Sunday socials where people wanted something small but flavorful. The celery offered a cool, crisp contrast to the warm tang of the cheese, creating a balance that felt playful and satisfying. As store-bought dips replaced homemade spreads, stuffed celery slowly disappeared. But one bite was enough to bring back the memory of bright kitchens, lace-covered tables, and laughter moving through crowded rooms. Fried salt pork strips were the kind of appetizer that showed up at gatherings where people cooked from memory instead of recipes, trusting their hands to know exactly how long to leave each piece in the skillet. The strips curled and sizzled as the fat rendered out, leaving behind crisp edges and a chewy center that tasted rich, salty, and deeply familiar to anyone raised in a southern black household. They were served with mustard on the side, the sharp tang balancing the heaviness of the meat in a way that kept people reaching for more even when they insisted they were done. These little bites disappeared fast at fish fries, backyard reunions, and living room gatherings where elders talked and kids circled the food table like it was a treasure chest. Fried salt pork was not fancy, and it certainly was not delicate, but it carried the fullness of a time when families used every part of what they had and turned it into something worth sharing. Over the decades, the dish faded as leaner meats became more common, but to those who remember it, the flavor still feels tied to warmth, tradition, and a kind of cooking that came from instinct and understanding rather than store-bought convenience. Okra patties were small fritters that turned a humble vegetable into something golden and irresistible, especially in households where okra grew in backyard gardens or local fields. Families chopped the pods finely, folding them into a batter seasoned with onion, pepper, and whatever spices the cook favored that day. The mixture hit the skillet in small spoonfuls, sizzling into patties with crisp edges and soft centers that tasted earthy, savory, and slightly sweet from the okra itself. These patties were easy to make in large batches, which made them perfect for church gatherings, holiday tables, or Sunday visits when neighbors stopped by without warning. They were eaten plain, dipped in hot sauce, or served beside other snacks that filled long tables lined with mismatched platters. Okra patties faded over the years as fresh okra became less common in urban kitchens, and younger generations moved toward meals that were quicker and easier. But those who remember them can still picture the bubbling skillet, the scent drifting across the room, and the pride of a cook who knew how to turn simple ingredients into something unforgettable. Okra patties were not just food. They were a link to gardeners, to elders, to summers spent outdoors, and to kitchens full of patient hands. Tomato aspic cups were one of the most surprising appetizers from mid-century gatherings, a dish that blended creativity, thrift, and formal presentation in a single wobbly bite made from seasoned tomato juice thickened with gelatin. The mixture was poured into tiny molds or muffin tins, where it set into bright red shapes that looked elegant on a platter. Families mixed in onion, celery, or peppers for texture, then served each chilled cup with a dollop of mayonnaise or a sprinkle of herbs. These cups appeared at formal community events, funerals, wedding receptions, and club meetings where people wanted to bring something that looked polished, even if it cost very little. They were tangy, savory, and refreshing in a way that feels unusual today, a flavor that older generations recognized instantly and younger ones rarely encountered. Over time, tomato aspic cups faded as gelatin salads drifted out of popularity, but they remain a powerful memory for anyone who grew up around mid-century gathering tables loaded with foods made to last through long afternoons. They were proof that creativity often came from necessity, and that even the simplest ingredients could be turned into something memorable with time and care. Potted meat spread on crackers was the quiet hero of Sunday dinners, fish fries, and after-church gatherings because it took almost no money and almost no time to prepare. Families would mix canned potted meat with a little mayonnaise, chopped onion, relish, or mustard, depending on who was cooking. The spread was creamy, salty, and rich in a way that filled the mouth without feeling heavy. Set on top of crackers just before serving, it became an appetizer that guests reached for even while saying they were saving room for the real meal. It was inexpensive, reliable, and comforting, especially for families who knew how to stretch pantry ingredients into something special. Potted meat spread faded as more modern dips and snacks took over store shelves, but nothing truly replaced the convenience and flavor of this simple mixture prepared by hand. For those who remember it, the taste brings back the sound of folding chairs scraping across fellowship hall floors, the hum of conversation rising over gospel music, and the satisfaction of food that was made to share. It was not fancy, but it was part of the rhythm of community life. Mini hush puppy balls were tiny bites of golden fried cornmeal that carried the same charm as their bigger fish fry counterparts, but were easier to grab and eat standing up families. Mixed cornmeal, onion, a touch of sugar, and spices, then dropped small spoonfuls into hot oil where they puffed into crisp little rounds. They came out crunchy on the outside, tender on the inside, and warm enough to tempt anyone passing the appetizer table. These mini hush puppies showed up at reunions, fish fries, church events, and home gatherings where friends and neighbors filled the house with conversation and laughter. They paired well with fish, chicken, or nothing at all, and they disappeared quickly because they were bite-sized and satisfying. Over time, fewer people made them from scratch as boxed mixes and store-bought snacks replaced homemade sides, but those who remember the real version can still picture the grease popping, the cornmeal browning, and the joy of biting into something freshly fried by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Mini hush puppies tasted like community, comfort, and tradition wrapped in a single bite. Sardine and onion sandwich squares were surprisingly common at community gatherings where families prepared foods that were inexpensive, flavorful, and easy to stretch. Sardines were mashed with diced onions, pepper, and sometimes a touch of vinegar or relish, creating a mixture that was bold and satisfying. Spread onto soft, white bread, the sandwiches were trimmed and cut into small squares or triangles that fit neatly on party trays. They were cheap to make but tasted like something hearty, something that carried both protein and punch in a single bite. Elders loved them because the flavor was familiar and practical, while kids often grew into appreciating them with age. These sandwich squares appeared at club meetings, work socials, union halls, and neighborhood gatherings where food was made to be shared freely. In time, they faded as sardines became less common in everyday kitchens and younger generations leaned toward milder flavors. But for those who remember them, sardine and onion sandwich squares evoke images of long tables covered in homemade dishes, elders laughing, and rooms filled with people who cared for one another deeply. Chicken neck bites were one of the most resourceful appetizers made in households that believed firmly in using every part of the chicken. The necks were seasoned well, often with salt, pepper, paprika, and a little flour, then fried until crisp and aromatic. They required patience to eat, but that was part of the ritual, part of the joy people gathered around bowls of them during family visits, fish fries, or late-night gatherings when the best stories were told and the best jokes were shared. Chicken neck bites were affordable, hearty, and surprisingly flavorful, carrying the taste of the seasoning and the pride of cooks who knew how to transform scraps into something delicious. These bites taught children to appreciate every cut of meat and taught adults to honor the traditions passed down through generations. Today, they are rarely served as appetizers, partly because fewer people cook with whole chickens, and partly because newer foods took their place. But the memory of chicken neck bites still lives in kitchens where elders worked with skill, patience, and creativity. Vienna sausage toothpick bites were one of the most nostalgic appetizers to ever sit on a community table. Families glazed the canned sausages with barbecue sauce, grape jelly, mustard, or brown sugar, letting them simmer until the flavors melted together into something sweet, salty, and incredibly addictive. Skewered with toothpicks, they were small enough to pop into your mouth while talking, laughing, or waiting for the main meal. Kids loved them because they were fun to eat. Adults loved them because they tasted like childhood, and everyone appreciated how quick and cheap they were to make. These bites showed up everywhere from birthday parties to church socials to kitchen gatherings where music played softly in the background. In time, as canned sausage fell out of fashion, the dish nearly vanished. But for those who grew up with them, the memory still tastes warm, sticky, and joyful, like a celebration you could hold between your fingers. Red bean dip with crushed crackers was the quiet star of gatherings where cooks understood the art of transforming simple ingredients into something deeply satisfying. Families mashed cooked red beans with onion, pepper, garlic, and a little oil until the mixture turned smooth and creamy. Crushed crackers were stirred in to thicken the dip and give it a subtle crunch. Spread on small bread rounds or served in a communal bowl with crackers on the side, the dip was earthy, warm, and comforting. It tasted like the heart of Southern cooking, where beans were a staple and creativity was essential. This dip appeared often at informal gatherings, work socials, and church events because it was affordable and filling. Over time, it faded as store-bought dips replaced homemade spreads, but people who remember it recall the scent rising from the warm bowl and the satisfaction of a dish made with love and resourcefulness. Pickled eggplant relish on toast rounds was one of the most unique appetizers to appear at mid-century African American gatherings, especially in households with gardens or access to local produce. Families chopped eggplant finely, cooked it down with vinegar, onions, peppers, and spices, then let it pickle until the flavor became bright, tangy, and slightly sweet. Served on toasted bread rounds, the relish offered a burst of flavor that surprised guests and won over anyone willing to try something new. It was a dish rooted in tradition and in the practice of preserving vegetables so nothing went to waste. The relish showed up at reunions, holiday tables, and club meetings where homemade foods carried pride and personality. By the 1980s, the dish had nearly disappeared as pickling traditions faded and convenience foods took over. But for those who tasted it, this appetizer remains unforgettable, a reminder of ingenuity, patience, and the creativity that shaped earlier kitchen traditions. Mini hoe cakes with cane syrup were tiny skillet cakes that tasted like the warmth of an early morning kitchen, the kind where someone was already humming before the sun came up. Families mixed a simple batter of cornmeal, water, and salt, then dropped small spoonfuls onto a hot, greased skillet where they sizzled into crisp-edged circles. These mini hoe cakes came out golden and warm, soft enough in the center to soak up whatever sweetness touched them. A drizzle of cane syrup transformed each bite into something rich and comforting, a flavor that felt older than the house itself. People served them at church gatherings, birthday breakfasts, and community events where food traveled across tables faster than conversations did. They were small enough to pick up with your fingers and good enough to make you pause mid-sentence. Over time, they faded as boxed pancake mixes and store-bought pastries took over morning routines. But for those who remember mini hoe cakes brushing against warm plates and syrup pooling at the edges, the memory is tied to hands that cooked with rhythm, patience, and a deep sense of tradition. These little cakes were never fancy, but they were always loved, always welcomed, and always eaten quickly. Cold-fried catfish nuggets were the unexpected stars of picnics and outdoor gatherings, where the food had to travel well and taste good even after the skillet cooled. Families seasoned catfish with salt, pepper, and cornmeal, then fried the pieces until crisp and golden. Instead of serving them hot, the nuggets were chilled and packed into picnic baskets or metal tins, where the flavors settled deeper into the fish. Cold-fried catfish had a firm bite, a savory crunch, and a clean flavor that held up beautifully outdoors. People reached for them during long afternoons under shade trees or during church outings where children ran while adults shared stories. These nuggets fit neatly on paper plates, spilled easily into waiting hands, and tasted just as good without reheating. Over time, they faded as fewer families fried fish at home and store-bought foods took center stage. But for those who remember the taste of cold catfish eaten beside a riverbank or at a folding table in a dusty churchyard, the memory still sits close to the heart. Cold-fried catfish nuggets represented community, time spent together, and the gift of food cooked with care long before the sun rose. Chicken liver spreads without onion were one of the more refined appetizers of the era, served at gatherings when hosts wanted to impress without spending much money. Families simmered chicken livers gently, blending them with butter, black pepper, paprika, and sometimes a splash of vinegar or broth until the mixture became smooth and rich. The result was a creamy spread that tasted savory and elegant, almost like something from a high-end restaurant. Even though it was made from inexpensive ingredients, people served it on toast rounds, crackers, or celery sticks, setting platters on lace-covered tables during card nights, anniversaries, and afternoon socials. The spread had a deep flavor that felt grown-up, something children rarely loved but adults always appreciated. It faded over the years as people moved away from organ meats and turned toward store-bought party dips. But those who remember chicken liver spreads recall the pride that came from making something so polished out of something so simple. It tasted like tradition, skill, and quiet sophistication. It was the kind of appetizer that made a gathering feel special even when the budget was modest. Molasses and peanut butter balls were small, sweet, savory bites that carried the legacy of Depression-era ingenuity into mid-century gatherings. Families stirred peanut butter with warm molasses until the mixture thickened, then rolled it into tiny balls that set as they cooled. The flavor was deep, sticky, and satisfying, a balance of sweetness and roasted nuttiness that felt far richer than the ingredients suggested. These little bites could be made quickly and cheaply, which made them ideal for church socials, after-school gatherings, and holiday tables where every family contributed something from home. They were small enough to eat in one bite and filling enough to quiet hunger until the main meal arrived. Kids loved them because they tasted like candy. Adults treasured them because they tasted like memory. Over time, they slipped away as modern sweets and packaged snacks took their place. But for those who grew up eating them from wax paper-lined plates, molasses and peanut butter balls still represent a kind of simple joy that has become rare. They remind people of kitchens where creativity mattered more than cost. Pinto bean fritters were born from pots of leftover beans seasoned deeply with salt, pepper, and whatever spices the cook favored that week. Instead of letting the leftovers sit, families mashed the beans, mixed them with flour, and spooned the batter into skillets where the fritters browned into crisp-edged patties. Each one tasted hearty, earthy, and warm, with the kind of richness that only beans cooked low and slow could provide. These fritters were eaten hot off the stove, sometimes dipped in hot sauce or mustard, sometimes eaten plain because the flavor was already enough. They were inexpensive, filling, and suited for gatherings where feeding many people mattered more than impressing them. Pinto bean fritters appeared at potlucks, homecomings, and family reunions, always disappearing faster than anyone expected. Over time, they vanished as fewer people made beans from scratch and store-bought options replaced homemade dishes. But for those who remember eating them straight from paper towels that absorbed the last bit of oil, the memory is thick with comfort. Pinto bean fritters were simple, yes, but never plain. They represented care, thrift, and the creativity of cooks who understood flavor down to its bones. Cabbage slaw cups were crisp little bites that brightened church function tables with their freshness and color. Families shredded cabbage finely, mixing it with a dressing of vinegar, sugar, salt, and pepper until the slaw tasted bright, crunchy, and slightly sweet. Instead of serving it in bowls, they spooned it into small lettuce cups or cabbage leaf scoops, turning a simple side dish into a tidy appetizer easy to pick up and eat. These cups appeared at bake sales, community meetings, and Sunday gatherings where the tables were filled with foods meant to stretch and share. They were refreshing among heavier dishes, offering a cool and crunchy contrast to fried foods and casseroles. Over time, cabbage slaw cups disappeared as people moved toward packaged salads and store-bought dressings. But for those who remember them sitting on mismatched platters beside punch bowls and sheet cakes, the memory is tied to community, generosity, and the pride of homemade food. They were simple, but they were loved. Sweet pickle ham rolls were one of the most cherished appetizers on mid-century potluck tables, combining salty, sweet, and creamy flavors in a single bite. Families spread softened cream cheese over thin slices of ham, placed a sweet pickle spear or slice in the center, then rolled everything tightly before slicing each log into small rounds. The result was a colorful spiral with a balance of flavors that was far more satisfying than its humble ingredients suggested. These rolls showed up at birthday parties, card nights, holiday gatherings, and school events where each family brought something to share. They were easy to eat, easy to prepare, and easy to love. Over time, they faded as processed trays replaced homemade snacks and as fewer people kept pickles and sliced ham as pantry staples. But for those who remember reaching for them on crowded buffet tables, the taste is tied to laughter, conversation, and afternoons filled with warmth. Sweet pickle ham rolls were proof that simple food could still feel special. Cornmeal-crusted green tomato bites were little rounds of tart, bright flavor wrapped in a crunchy golden crust. Families sliced firm green tomatoes into thin rounds, dipped each slice into seasoned cornmeal, then fried them until the edges crisped and the centers softened. Cut into smaller pieces or served whole, these bites were tangy, savory, and perfect for dipping into mayonnaise or hot sauce. They were especially popular at summer gatherings when gardens overflowed with tomatoes that had not yet ripened. Over time, they became less common as fewer people grew their own produce and frying at home became less frequent. But for those who remember them, green tomato bites still taste like hot days, open windows, and kitchens that smelled like sizzling cornmeal. They carried the brightness of summer and the comfort of tradition in every bite. Stuffed prunes with cheese were an unexpected but beloved mid-century appetizer that paired sweetness with a creamy filling in a way that surprised first-timers' families. Split prunes, removed the pits, and filled the centers with a soft cheese mixture that balanced the fruit's deep sweetness. Sometimes they topped them with nuts or spices before chilling them and placing them on serving trays lined with doilies. These little bites appeared at formal gatherings, holiday parties, and church socials where cooks enjoyed showing off something a bit unusual. Their flavor was rich, tender, and almost dessert-like, but grounded by the tang of the cheese. Over time, stuffed prunes faded as tastes changed, and fresher foods replaced dried fruit dishes. But for those who remember them on party trays beside deviled eggs and miniature sandwiches, the memory feels tied to elegance, creativity, and the charm of homemakers who like to surprise their guests. Mini smothered sausage balls were hearty, steaming bites that warmed up gatherings before the main meal arrived. Families rolled seasoned sausage into tiny balls, browned them in a skillet, then simmered them in a thick gravy made from pan drippings and flour. The gravy coated each ball in savory richness, turning the appetizer into something filling and undeniably comforting. Served with toothpicks, they were perfect for standing around talking while reaching for one more bite. These sausage balls showed up at winter gatherings, Sunday dinners, and community events where hot, comforting food was always welcomed. Over time, they nearly vanished as people moved toward lighter party foods and quicker recipes. But for those who tasted them, the memory of that warm gravy, tender sausage, and aroma drifting from the kitchen is impossible to forget. Sweet potato tea cakes were soft little miracles that brought a whisper of sweetness to hard days. Made from mashed sweet potatoes, sugar, and flour, they baked up tender and fragrant, somewhere between a cookie and a biscuit. The flavor was deep and earthy, tied to the African roots that first carried sweet potatoes across the ocean. Women baked them for children after long hours in the fields, serving them with tea, molasses, or just a kind word. The dough was often mixed by hand in wooden bowls, shaped without measuring, guided only by touch and memory. Even in times when sugar was scarce, the natural sweetness of the potato carried the recipe through. Each cake was a lesson in resourcefulness and care, a soft, spiced offering that said, "We made it through another day." To eat one was to taste both survival and love, baked gently into every crumb. Liver and onions with pan gravy paired the deep, earthy flavor of seared beef liver with the gentle sweetness of caramelized onions for a meal that was hearty and nourishing. It was once a staple in many African American homes, especially in rural communities, valued for its affordability and high iron content. After the liver was browned, the pan drippings were turned into a rich brown gravy, thickened with flour and seasoned with salt and pepper. Served with mashed potatoes or rice, it offered comfort and satisfaction. While the strong flavor of liver wasn't for everyone, those who grew up with it often carried the taste into adulthood. In the days before easy access to costly cuts of meat, liver provided an accessible protein source that fit a waste-not approach to cooking, ensuring no part of the animal went unused, and every meal was as filling as it was purposeful. Bars were the sticky sweet treasures of church bake sales and weekend coffee hours. A simple base of yellow cake mix formed the bottom layer, pressed into a pan to create a soft crust. The topping combined cream cheese, powdered sugar, and eggs into a rich custard that baked into a slightly crisp surface while staying deliciously gooey beneath. Cut into neat squares once cooled, they delivered a sweet rush that paired perfectly with strong coffee or a cold glass of milk. Children loved the melt-in-your-mouth texture, while adults appreciated the effortless preparation and crowd-pleasing flavor. In the 1970s, these bars spread quickly through community cookbooks and potluck tables, their irresistible combination of convenience and indulgence making them a near-constant presence. Chess squares proved that simplicity could be decadent, offering a dessert so rich and satisfying that one bite was never enough, ensuring their place in the memories of countless family gatherings and joyful kitchen conversations. Cherry Jubilee. Elderflower cordial brought delicate sweetness and subtle healing to kitchens that often lacked sugar and fruit. When elder shrubs burst into fragrant clusters in early summer, gatherers clipped the blossoms and steeped them in water with a touch of honey or sorghum to create a lightly floral syrup. This cordial could be sipped as a soothing drink, stirred into simple desserts, or used as a gentle remedy for coughs and fevers. The method reflected old-world European customs while blending with African-American herbal practice, showing how cultures met in the shared search for flavor and wellness. Long after emancipation, elderflower cordial remained a quiet luxury in rural households, prized for its refreshing taste during hot southern days. Today, it reappears in cocktails and artisanal sodas, but its roots lie in careful foraging and centuries of folk medicine. Elderflower cordial proves that even in times of want, people found ways to capture the fleeting perfume of summer and preserve it for moments of calm and celebration. Skillet. Fried catfish with cornmeal crust was the pride of riverbank communities and churchyard gatherings. Fishermen returned at dawn with fresh-caught catfish while cooks prepared heavy iron skillets filled with hot lard or peanut oil. Fillets were dredged in seasoned cornmeal until every piece was coated in a golden layer ready for the crackling pan. The sizzle of fish hitting the oil was music to children waiting for the first crisp bite. Friday fish fries became weekly celebrations where neighbors brought sides of slaw and hush puppies, and stories flowed as freely as sweet tea. The flavor of smoky river water lingered in each flaky bite, reminding everyone of the connection between food and place. Modern diners may order catfish in restaurants, but the ritual of catching, cleaning, and frying by the water's edge has faded, leaving only memories of warm evenings when the entire town smelled of cornmeal and spice and laughter carried across the banks. Fish head stew was a dish born out of necessity, yet it carried surprising depth and flavor. Fish heads, often discarded by others, were simmered slowly with onions, potatoes, and rice until they yielded every ounce of richness to the broth. My grandmother insisted the heads made the stew better than fillets, providing body and nourishment that nothing else could. The bones and skin flavored the liquid until it turned hearty and comforting. Potatoes stretched the meal, rice thickened it, and vegetables added substance, turning scraps into a filling supper. The taste was strong, earthy, and unforgettable, reminding everyone that no part of food should go unused. For Black families in the 1960s, fish head stew was a common way to stretch the catch of the day, ensuring nothing went to waste. It became a lesson in thrift and gratitude, proof that survival demanded creativity. Fish head stew was both humble and mighty, sustaining families through lean times with flavor and tradition. Cornbread trifle was the kind of dessert that proved creativity could make even leftovers feel like a feast. When cornbread went stale, it wasn't thrown away. It was reborn. Crumbled into bowls, soaked with sweet milk or molasses, and layered with bits of fruit if available, it became a pudding-like treat that filled bellies and hearts alike. The texture was soft and creamy, rich without requiring riches. It was food for the end of the week, when cupboards were bare but family still gathered to share what was left. Each spoonful carried both sweetness and survival, the magic of making something out of nothing. Cornbread trifle was not a luxury. It was an act of imagination. It turned scarcity into flavor and the ordinary into comfort. Even now, its story lingers, a reminder that sometimes the best recipes are born from the need to keep going. Coopi stew was a hearty, protein-rich dish that could feed a family on little more than field peas, onions, and a bit of cured pork. Simmered low and slow, the cowpeas absorbed the smoky, savory flavors of ham hock or salt pork, creating a rich broth. This was a common dish in African-American homes, particularly in the South, where cowpeas were easy to grow and store. The stew was ladled over rice or eaten with cornbread, making it both filling and affordable. Cowpea stew often appeared in late summer and fall when harvests were abundant, and it was a way to stretch fresh produce into satisfying meals. The taste was earthy, the texture creamy, and it carried the comfort of something made to nourish in every sense of the word. Though it remains known in some circles, for many it has faded into memory, overshadowed by other bean and pea recipes. Yet it still stands as a testament to the art of making humble ingredients into something worth remembering, that tasted far richer than its modest origins. Eggs, sugar, butter, and tangy buttermilk whisked together into a smooth filling that baked in a single crust until the surface browned lightly and the center set to a creamy consistency. The slight tang of the buttermilk balanced the sweetness, making each bite both comforting and intriguing. African American families in the 1970s valued the recipe for its thrift and reliability, knowing that even in lean times a luxurious dessert was within reach. Served warm or chilled, plain or with a scattering of fresh berries, buttermilk pie delighted guests without demanding complicated techniques or expensive ingredients. Its enduring charm lay in the way it brought people together around something humble yet special. Each slice carried the quiet satisfaction of resourcefulness and tradition, a reminder that the heart of hospitality often rests in the simplest, most lovingly prepared dishes shared at the end of a long meal. Wild persimmon leather served as a natural energy bar long before packaged snacks existed. Fully ripe wild persimmons, soft and honey-sweet, were mashed into a smooth pulp and spread thinly on clean boards or large leaves. Left in the sun to dry or placed near the gentle heat of a hearth, the mixture became a chewy sheet that kept for weeks. This portable treat provided a quick source of calories for long days in the fields and could be tucked into cloth packets for later use. The technique echoed African and indigenous methods of drying fruit to preserve it for travel and winter storage. After emancipation, many rural families continued to make persimmon leather as an autumn tradition, and some Appalachian homesteads still practice it today. Its deep caramel flavor and long shelf life show how ingenuity and patience created foods that were both practical and delicious. Wild persimmon leather stands as a vivid link between past and present, proving that simple preservation can yield enduring taste and nourishment. Chitlin's holiday feast once marked winter celebrations with an aroma as unforgettable as the labor required to prepare it. Hog intestines were cleaned thoroughly, then simmered for hours with onions, vinegar, and spices until tender. The dish demanded patience and community, often bringing families together for a full day of washing and cooking. Served with hot sauce and cornbread, chitlins carried the history of using every part of the animal, a practice born of necessity during slavery and carried forward as a mark of resilience. Despite the strong scent that filled kitchens and neighborhoods, the feast represented abundance and pride, especially during Christmas and New Year gatherings. Elders spoke of the old days while younger generations learned the careful methods required to make the dish safe and flavorful. In many places, health concerns and changing tastes have pushed chitlins aside, but the tradition still holds a powerful place in memory as a symbol of perseverance and celebration. Ham bone soup with vegetables was one of those meals where one piece of meat flavored an entire pot. A single ham bone, stripped of most of its meat, simmered for hours with onions, carrots, and potatoes until the broth turned rich and smoky. My grandmother would add beans or greens if she had them, letting the flavors meld into something far more substantial than the ingredients suggested. Families gathered around steaming bowls, dipping bread into the broth and savoring the flavor the bone had left behind. It was frugal cooking at its finest, taking scraps and stretching them into nourishment. The soup fed many mouths, warmed cold nights, and made do with what was available. In the 1960s, when meat was costly, a ham bone could be the centerpiece of dinner, proving that thrift and patience could coax flavor out of nearly anything. Ham bone soup with vegetables carried both practicality and comfort in every ladleful. Hoppin John was more than just a meal. It was a tradition steeped in hope and symbolism. Made from black-eyed peas simmered with onions, peppers, and pork, then served over rice, it was a dish prepared on New Year's Day to bring good luck for the year ahead. In African American kitchens, especially in the South, the peas represented coins and the rice symbolized abundance, while the greens, often served alongside, stood for paper money. Smoked ham hock, bacon, or fatback lent a deep, savory flavor that turned simple ingredients into something rich and comforting. Families would gather around bowls of Hoppin John, sharing not only food but the belief in a better year to come. Its origins trace back to West African culinary traditions brought over by enslaved people, blending with Southern ingredients to create a uniquely African American staple. While it is still made in some homes today, the widespread observance of this tradition has waned, and many now know it only by name. Yet for those who keep it alive, Hoppin John remains a flavorful reminder of heritage, resilience, and the power of food to carry meaning. If one of these appetizers stirred a memory, drop it in the comments and tap like and subscribe so these forgotten flavors can keep finding their way back to us.